Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's Pastor Study. This week we've been looking at Psalm 84. Very famous psalm. How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord of hosts, and better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere. Phrases that we hear often in the church songs. Um, so as we're looking through this, that jumps out. It's something that we engage with. But as I sort of dug into the psalm and pondered it a little bit, again, in the entire third book of the Psalms, the theme being sanctuary, this idea of the sense of awe we get over various things kind of came over me, and what brings that out. And I think it's different things at different times. I made reference to the Yankees game that I went to, and Yankee Stadium. How the place was a dump. It was awful. It looked dirty. You looked like it was broken down. But still, just when we think through the history that was attached to that building, um, it leaves a sense of awe and a sense of wonder at the scope of what had taken place. And when we're talking about the sanctuary of God, there's an indescribable wonder and awe at the magnificence of what it is. When you think back to the temple, if you look, go look up pictures and read the description of the temple in the Bible, it was just this magnificent building in and of itself. And then you attach the spiritual significance that's there, and it would be hard to grasp the idea of how extraordinary that is. We can get that sense sometime if you've ever traveled to a basilica or a cathedral and looked at the immenseness of these buildings that take decades, sometimes hundreds of years to build. The intricacy, the work that is involved in it, and the spiritual significance that every aspect of these buildings has. They really should point to God, but then oftentimes you go to those buildings and you realize as much spiritual significance as should be attached to that, they're empty, they're hollow, they're meaningless because they've really walked away from the roots of why they were built. Oftentimes now, especially in our, our more rural communities, when we're building church buildings, they end up being utilitarian just because that's the resources that are available and what has to be done. And some of it, I think, is a shame that we can't put more energy, effort, money into our buildings and reflect some of that glory, that awe-inspiring nature that can come about with those sorts of things. Wanted to mention one thing that I really didn't touch on Sunday that's very much involved in the process of this psalm is towards the end, verse 11, where it says, "For the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord bestows favor and honor. No good thing does he withhold from those who walk uprightly." That idea of sun and shield, God is our sun. He's our guide. He illuminates. He brightens everything up. So he's guiding us, but he's also our shield. He's protecting us. It seems like an odd pairing initially, sun and shield, but as you break it down, you really recognize, not only does he guide me and illuminate me, but he protects me along the way. And I can just rest and trust that he's there. He is bestowing that favor and honor. He doesn't withhold good things from us. I think sometimes we think that God is holding back from us. He doesn't do that. He gives us everything that we need. He fills us with good things. Sometimes they're not what we want, but they're also just temporary moments, temporary things that are pointing ahead to that hope. And that was something we talked about as we went through that. And I know some of the discussions after the sermon came back to that it's focused on that hope to come. And this idea of sanctuary and this idea of awe is that glimpse of the hope that's coming. It is preparing us for eternity, and it's empowering us. It's sort of the energy, the shot in the arm that we need sometimes to push through, that we remember that awe and that wonder and that sense of something so much greater than we are. Um, Interesting question that came up in the discussions is the idea of sparrows in the Bible. One of the questions I was given was how often do we see it? So I looked this up. Um, the Old Testament, it appears that sparrow specifically is used 3 times in 3 different psalms. Two psalms and a proverb. Generally speaking, it can be translated sparrow or simply small bird. Um, it's giving that idea of something small. I think, in a sense, something innocent. A sparrow doesn't bother anybody. Some bigger birds, some other birds are more intense, but a sparrow is just a sparrow, and it's God is keeping watch over it. It is what it is, and has its connection as it does. In the New Testament, Jesus refers to sparrows twice. It would appear it's in 4 Gospels, 2 parallel stories where he says, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny, and not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father?" So sparrows are small. They're essentially worthless. They're insignificant, but still, God watches out for them. God cares for them. That that same idea when Jesus also says, "Don't fear. Aren't you more valuable than the sparrows?" God watches out for them. Don't you think that He's going to watch out for you that much more? Um, so this idea that they're small, they're insignificant, but at the same time, God cares for them. God watches out for them. And in this psalm, the psalmist is seeing these insignificant, innocent birds that are in this immense, glorious uh, building. And I'm not sure about the sparrow nests. I'm not sure exactly where they would put those in a temple, but the swallows, they can stick their nests to the side of anything. When I go fishing over by Lanesboro, there's our sort of favorite stream there outside of Preston. I would tell you where it is, but then I'd have to kill you. Um, but underneath this bridge is just filled with swallow nests, and you can see that the highway department goes and breaks them down, or floods wash them away about once a year. Um, but they're just everywhere, and they can just stick to anything. And you can just imagine these swallows nests up in the corner of the temple, surrounded by gold and ornate. And what jumped into my mind was the person that was the temple janitor that gets frustrated because every few days he's got to go with some long stick and knock down and scrub out the swallows nests in the temple. But the writer just sees this innocence there, and sort of ponders, even the birds want to be in the presence of their creator. And what would it be like to live there and to not leave that presence and just bask in the glory all the time? Imagine if this gold encrusted ornate temple just became commonplace. It was every day. It is what it is. It's just that's an intense thought, but that is that hope that we were talking about. That's what we're going to get to. We just have to plug along. Um, and ultimately, that's what we were created for. We were created to worship. We were created to be in the presence of God. We were created to be in community with each other. That idea of worship not being individual, it's corporate. It is as a group. That's why this separation time, this odd time with the church, that's why it's so hard. That's why we want to get back together. We want to push to get back together. But we want to do it right. We want to do it safe. What does that look like? We don't have any good answers. Our church as a church, we're not rushing immediately to get back together. We want to do it right. We want to make sure we're protecting people and that we're being as responsible as we can. But I completely understand those churches that are rushing and that are pushing, because it's what we were created to do. It's what we were intended to be. So that's what we keep moving for. And I'm hoping, this is one of my big prayers during this time, is that we're pondering this and we're understanding this immense loss that we're feeling by not being together regularly, and that we wouldn't take it for granted from here on out. that we would commit a little bit more to each other, commit to what the church stands for, what it's intended to be, and we can find ways together to move forward and improve things. I don't want to just go back to normal. I want it to be better. I want it to be more honoring to God, more supportive to each other, um, because that's what we're here for. That's what we're called to. Um, so I'm just looking over the notes on what I was given. God gives us strength. Um, he continues to push us forward, and again, getting back to the awe, I think that's that hope that we're pushing, and it's the strength of knowing what's coming. And okay, just got let's push a little bit farther. That I don't want to do this. I don't want to spend this time. I don't want to put forth this effort. I would really rather be doing these things, but then I remember why I'm doing what I'm doing, and it gives me a little bit more strength. And God impresses that on me, and it's not always what I expect. It's not always what I'm looking for. Sometimes it's a song. Sometimes it's a task. Sometimes it's random, but sometimes we have to plan those things just to strengthen us and move us forward. Um, and an odd one for me, when I was a youth pastor in the cities, I spent so much of my time pushing towards things that you just didn't really see a positive outcome for. I mean, you were doing things, but we were working for the long term rather than the short term. So when we were trying to judge results and say, what did I actually accomplish today, this week, this month, this this semester, it was hard. So one of the things that I did, a task that I set aside, was we had a pop machine that the youth group kids went. I filled the pop machine. I had somebody that wanted to do it for me, and I kept having to tell her, "No, Kathy, no, that's my task." Why? Because at the end, I would look at it, and it would be completely full. I'd get every single can, every line was perfect, and that was one thing that gave me a little bit of a push, because it was this objective thing that I could say, "Look what I did. It's done. It's done well. It's done completely." And it gave me just a little bit more energy to go forward and say, you know what, even when it feels like you haven't accomplished anything, you have. God will honor the efforts that you're doing to move forward. But sometimes we just need that shot in the arm, and that was one of mine, that I would regularly say, I need this to say, look, it can be done, and other things are happening, and God is taking care of it, even if you can't see it. What you're seeing in the pop machine is taking place in the world. Everything is as it's supposed to be. And it is working towards that end at the very least. So find those things. Find those things that can strengthen you. Don't always just rely on it being random and distant. We can take control of some of those aspects of our lives because God's given us some of those things. Maybe it's setting something up where you have a conversation with somebody a certain time where you say, hey, I need to have that talk, or hey, I need to do this, or I need to set aside this time to just be quiet and feel that presence of God. And maybe that happens through reading, through music, whatever it is. But that's what we're pushing forward to, focusing on that hope in front of us and moving through that every day, despite the difficulties, despite the struggles. And we'll make it to the end because God's going to bring us there. So that's Psalm 84. Next week, Psalm 90. Looking forward to it. We will see you there. God bless.